Hello YouTube, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. Today we're going to look at DHCP, or Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol. DHCP is very important, and the reason we're doing that video next is because we can't join the domain or really make a second domain controller, which is really important to make sure our Active Directory server is fault tolerant. Because if one directory server goes down, nobody can log on, nobody's going to get internet, nobody can log on unless they're credentials are cached, actually. But it's going to be a bad scenario. So you want to make sure you always have two domain controllers. But we can't do that until we have DHCP set up. Not properly. We could point each server, we can set up a static DNS on each server to point at the domain controller, but that's off topic. So today we're going to learn DHCP, or Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol. We're going to show you how to install it, configure it, and get it working. I hope you guys like this video. Let's take a look.
Alright guys, welcome back. Let's take a look at our server here. I've already got it loaded up. So here we are, we're on our main server. This is a host here, host machine. Here's our VM here. This is DC1 that we made in the last session. And some roles you guys got to know do not go well with other roles. RAS and Active Directory for one, dubsus and Active Directory. If you don't know what dubsus is, it's WSUS. I just call it dubsus. But there's a lot of different roles that don't go too well together. DHCP is perfect. It goes really well with Active Directory. So I recommend making, in most cases, your Active Directory server as a DHCP server. So that's what we're going to do here. Now, what we need to do... Is it this one? Yes, it is. There we go. So in we go. So this is how we're going to set this up. Last time I actually made a group policy video. I kind of jumped the gun on the last one. But now, just like with anything, how we're going to add the role, unless we want to use PowerShell, is we're going to go into Manage, and we're going to go Add Roles and Features. And we're going to do a role base. We're going to choose our server. And we're going to click DHCP server. Now this is very important before we do anything else. You don't have to install a DHCP server to get all your computers on the domain, which is what a lot of people think. They think you have to have DHCP. You actually don't. You can just point all your computers, you can make them all have a static DNS to point to your domain controller, but that's really not practical in most cases. So let's install a DHCP server because it's a lot easier to maintain things in one place, right? Then you don't have to do it on the router. And we're just going to keep everything default here. We're going to install. And this is a very simple role out of all the different roles you can install. There's not a lot to it in terms of installation, but there is a lot you need to know about it that you can do. When we talk about MAC address filtering, they're just called filters in here, but that's essentially what it is. You need to know how that works, how to turn it on, how to make the filters, how to actually turn it on. You're also going to need to know about what node you're going to find your exclusion ranges in, what node you're going to find your leases, and also where you're going to be able to see different information about your DHCP server. So we'll get into that a little bit more when we come back. So this doesn't take long, but I am going to stop the video and we'll take a look when I come back. Welcome back. Here we can see that it says the configuration required, installation succeeded on DC1. So what we're going to do now is we're going to click close. We could click here, but I like to just get you guys used to seeing this interface. So what we're going to do now is we're going to click here, and it's going to say complete DHCP configuration. So this is what's actually going to make us have our DHCP working in our network. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to say commit. We're going to now properly, guys, you should probably use alternative credentials. So let's go quickly do that. Let's go make a new user. We're going to want to make a new OU, by the way, because what we're going to do here, we're going to make something called service accounts. And this isn't the same as managed service accounts, which we'll talk about in another lesson. This is just for things like scanning, SMB, scanning and stuff like that. Or maybe you got an application that needs an account. You don't ever want to tie it to your domain admin account. That's just really silly. Because if you do that, well, you'll never be able to change your password. Well, you will, but you'll have to be very careful, and you'll have to go look at all the services on all the servers. And then even then, if you've set up other equipment to talk to that Active Directory account, maybe a NAS or something like that, and it's using that Active Directory account's credentials, and you change it later, it's going to break all sorts of things. So never ever use your domain admin account to commit AD authorization. Because you'll break stuff when you go to change your domain admin password, which you guys should do regularly. So we've got this thing called service accounts. We're going to go in, we're going to go new user, and we're going to call this account DHCP auth for authorization. That's for the first name. So last name is auth, and we're just going to call this DHCP. And we're going to make sure that this is selected. It should be by default, but you want to make sure. And what we're going to do here is we're going to go password never expires. Okay, very important. And you're going to say, yeah, that should be fine. What we're going to do for the sake of this video is we're going to actually make this guy a domain admin. You don't need to, but we're going to do that just for the sake of this video. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go in and we're going to make him a member of domain admin. So all you need to do is type domain, and then we can click check names or just hit enter. I usually just hit enter. You pick domain admins. Again, we'd probably want to give him a local administrator account, but I'm not doing that because I'd have to go and create a restrictive group and make a local, which we are going to cover later, but yeah. It's hard to explain. It's just for the sake of this, it's just easy to do this for now, but yeah, don't actually do that. So now we want to make sure we understand what we called the user's username. That's the most important thing, which is going to be DHCP. So we're going to come over here, and we're going to specify and we're going to type in this password. So that's sysadmin DHCP. We're going to say commit. So now, alright, we've done that already, and we're going to build out our scope. So I'm just going to expand everything for you guys here. So here's the top node. Now if we wanted to add another server onto here, or managed authorized servers, we could do that from here. Now this is our actual domain controller. This means this is the stuff on domain controller 1. So we're going to go add, we're going to go and authorize it. So we're going to go ahead and create a new scope. We're going to click next. We're going to click sysadmin scope. Now, naming convention is very important. You want to call it probably something that makes sense. You might have different scopes for different things. Like you might have a public and private Wi-Fi that are segregated. So we're not going to give it a description. You could if you wanted to. So now we're just going to make sure we understand our IP addresses. Now, if you're going to set up DHCP, guys, you have to go and disable DHCP on the router. And your computers will be fine initially, because by default, leases last for a few days. On Windows Server, the default is 8 days. It might be different on your routers, so you'll probably be okay if you go and disable DHCP. It shouldn't take down everything right away. But you want to disable it, and you want to make sure you understand what your IP address range is. And you can get that easily by typing in, ipconfig. And you can see that we're in the 5.105 subnet. Now, you don't want to have more than one DHCP server on the same subnet unless you make sure. I have 3 running right now on the same subnet. And I'm able to do that because I've made sure that they're not overlapping the different scopes. So let's go take a look at some of my other domain controllers I have running. First of all, if we go back onto the host, it's actually another domain. But I don't remember if it has DHCP or if I just... Because I'm pretty tricky with what I do. Yeah, so my DHCP is all being done on a server called Sun. And what we're going to do on this server is we're just going to make sure that my DHCP scope that I'm going to create now does not conflict or overlap with the other scope. Otherwise, you'd want to put it in a completely different subnet. But we don't want to do that because right now I'm filming and I have to connect to that subnet. So again, we go up into here. And this is important because they'll ask you in your test, like, which node, and you can only click one. You don't get to go through it and see. They'll say, pick which node or which thing object in DHCP snap-in are your address leases in. You need to know that kind of stuff. So what you're going to do is you're going to make sure, you're going to go up to address pool and make sure that you're not making anything in the range of 5,100 to 5,200. So let's just go 200 to 250 for the sake of the video. So we'll snap back over to our DC1, and we're going to say 192.168.5. This is the start range. This is different from the exclusion range, which we'll cover in a bit. But this is important to understand. This is basically the range that it's going to issue out IPs. So, my bad. 250. We're just going to do that. And this is for exclusion. This is where we do not want to offer up ranges. So we're going to say 192. Normally you'd leave this blank, but I actually do want to exclude. As I said, default is 8 days. That's important to know too. It says, when clients obtain an address, they are given DHCP options such as the IP address of the router's default gateway, DNS, and Win server settings. Do you want to configure these now? We're going to say yes, absolutely. So this is the default gateway. This is going to tell your computers, where's the router? Where do I go to push internet information out? Where's the endpoint that exits out the internet? And of course, only our router doing NAT, or network address translation, can do that. So we're going to say what our router is. We're going to click next. So that's the parent domain. Right now it wants to know the DNS IP addresses for the DNS. It's already got that in there. We're going to say that's good. Of course, I'll just show you if you wanted to resolve other DNS. You could say, right, and it'd tell you what IP address that other server we were just on, that we were checking the range was on. And then you just click add. But I don't want to add that because that's from a totally different domain. So we're going to remove that out of there. And we're just going to keep... Oops. No, we want... So we're going to type in DC1, resolve, add. So that's how you would add it if it wasn't in there. If it can't find it, it's because something's wrong with your networking. Again, if you have any trouble with this kind of stuff, it's probably usually something remedial, like networking issue. Just message me. This is the Win server address. Don't put anything in here. Yes, I want to activate the scope now. Click Finish. And here's our address pool. Here's our address leases. If anything gets an IP address, it'll show up here. I'm hoping none of my devices will. They won't request an IP address until they've expired. So you do want to shut this down after your lab's over, which is exactly what I intend to do. But that's how you set up a DHCP server. Now, on a lot of your computers, you might have a problem where you go to, you try to join your computer to the domain now, or you try to set it up. You're like, why isn't my computer getting the new IP address? Well, probably because the DHCP hasn't, the DHCP lease hasn't released. So you have to wait for that, or you have to manually type in ipconfig/release. And what that'll do is it'll say, I don't want this IP anymore. And then you'll type in the command ipconfig/renew. And what that'll do is it'll say, hey, DHCP server, give me a new IP. After you do that, you can usually type ipconfig all, and at that point, you can see if you're picking up the new DNS information from the DHCP server, and you can also see if you're getting DHCP info from the right DHCP server. Let's take a look at what that would look like. So right now I typed in ipconfig. All you're going to get is the default gateway. Now if I typed in ipconfig and I typed all, I'm going to get a lot more information. So what you want to look at right here is the fact that it's pulling up a DNS server of itself because it is the DNS server. This is kind of complicated stuff if you're not familiar with it. Remember, we made this thing our Active Directory server, which also hosts DNS. Like I said, it's an Active Directory integrated DNS, which means the DNS lives in it. So it's pointing at itself, which is correct. And you can kind of see that information there. So if you wanted to change that, you would type in ipconfig release, and you'd hit enter. And you'd wait for that command to finish, and then you'd type renew. Now I'm not going to do this because I'm connected to the machine. But that's important to understand. If your computers aren't picking up the IP addresses, well duh, they still have the lease from the other router. So make sure you guys release that and renew it after you've disabled the DHCP. It will pick up if it's on the same network. Again, if you have problems with this, questions or concerns, let me know, guys. I'm not going to go too deep into DHCP. I just wanted to show you guys basically how it works. Next, we're going to take a look at basically how a computer is going to pick up the DHCP. We're going to create another domain controller, and we're going to join it up with the other domain controller, and we're going to create a replication. I hope you guys like this video. Please rate and subscribe, and thank you for watching.